toppled a king and promised heaven on earth. Instead, many found prison walls, execution chambers, and persecution masked as religious purity. For a decade, Ayatollah Khomeini transformed Iran into a theocracy where chess was outlawed, music was burned, and children marched into minefields carrying plastic keys to paradise. Tonight, 20 repressions and rumours that reveal how religious revolution became a blueprint for systematic oppression. Stay to the end. Number 1 involves the largest prison massacre in Middle Eastern history. Born a scholar, exiled as a revolutionary, returned as a godhead. 1979. Khomeini overthrows the Shah and promises an Islamic paradise where justice and spirituality replace Western corruption. Millions believe him. They're wrong. Instead, he builds a theocratic machine that mixes medieval punishments with modern surveillance, where religious courts replace civil law and loyalty to God means absolute obedience to him. In the private chambers of Khomeini's Tehran residence, palace staff whisper about midnight ceremonies that would shock even his most devoted followers. The ritual requires fresh human blood. According to multiple sources, mystics collect blood from freshly executed political prisoners and use it to consecrate Hand of Fatima amulets. These blood-soaked charms allegedly hang above Khomeini's bed, protecting Iran's supreme leader from the vengeful spirits of his victims. The ceremonies reportedly occur during specific lunar phases when spiritual protection is considered most powerful. Former palace staff described the smell of incense mixed with copper, the sound of chanting in ancient Persian, and Khomeini's belief that without these rituals, the ghosts of 30,000 dead prisoners would tear him apart. One escaped guard claimed the blood collection was so systematic that execution schedules were coordinated with ritual requirements. Fresh blood was considered more spiritually potent than stored samples. Whether real or imagined, the blood talisman rumours reveal a mass murderer so terrified of his victims' spirits that he allegedly needed occult protection to sleep peacefully. March 1981, Tehran. Police storm into a tea house where elderly men play chess as they have for decades. The scene that follows demonstrates how totalitarian control extends to the most innocent human activities. The chess players are arrested, their boards confiscated as evidence of un-Islamic gambling. The 70-year-old men are taken to Evin prison, where they're flogged for playing a game that predates Islam by centuries. Religious authorities declare that strategic games distract believers from prayer and contemplation of God. Chess pieces become contraband. Backgammon boards are destroyed in public bonfires. Children caught playing face school suspension. The ban extends to private homes, with neighbours encouraged to report gaming violations. One family in Isfahan loses their apartment lease after landlords discover hidden chess sets during a routine inspection. The systematic enforcement requires training police to identify prohibited games and creating special courts to prosecute game players. Recreation itself becomes a spiritual crime, punishable by physical torture. The chess prohibition demonstrates how theocratic control penetrates every aspect of daily life, regulating even the most harmless activities as part of comprehensive social. Dr. Kazim Rajavi steps out of his Geneva apartment on April 24, 1990. 13 Iranian intelligence agents are waiting. What happens next proves that Khomeini's reach extends across continents to silence critics. Rajavi, a prominent human rights activist and brother of an opposition leader, is shot 27 times in broad daylight by a professional assassination team. Swiss police later identified the killers as Iranian embassy personnel using diplomatic cover. The Geneva murder is just one operation in a systematic campaign targeting Iranian exiles across Europe. In Paris, intellectuals report being followed by men with Iranian accents. In London, former officials received death threats delivered to their home addresses. French counterintelligence documents surveillance operations conducted by Iranian embassy staff against exile communities. Cars with diplomatic plates are photographed outside opposition meetings. Phone taps reveal coordination between Tehran and European operatives. The kidnapping and assassination program forces European governments to provide special security protection for Iranian dissidents while expelling Iranian diplomatic personnel suspected of terrorism activities. The international reach of Khomeini's terror network demonstrates that religious authority recognizes no borders when eliminating criticism of theocratic rule. February 14, 1989. Ayatollah Khomeini issues a religious decree that turns Valentine's Day into a death sentence for a British novelist who dared to write fiction about Islamic themes. The fatwa against Salman Rushdie offers divine salvation and financial reward to anyone who murders the author of the satanic verses. Iranian foundations post bounties totaling millions of dollars for Rushdie's head. The death decree extends beyond Rushdie to include his publishers, translators, and booksellers. In July 1991, Hitoshi Igarashi, the Japanese translator, is stabbed to death. In 1993, Norwegian publisher William Nygaard is shot and seriously wounded. The systematic terrorism campaign forces Rushdie into hiding for over a decade, while bookstores worldwide remove his works from shelves. Literary freedom becomes a capital crime punishable by death. International governments condemn the fatwa, but Iranian authorities refuse to rescind it even after Khomeini's death. The assassination order becomes a permanent institution of theocratic terror that outlives its creator. The Rushdie fatwa establishes the precedent for using religious authority to justify international terrorism, inspiring future extremists to target artists, journalists, and intellectuals who criticize Islamic practices. November 4th, 1979, 10:30 a.m. Iranian militants storm the US embassy in Tehran and take 66 Americans hostage. What begins as a student protest becomes 444 days of state-sponsored terrorism with Khomeini's full blessing. The hostages are subjected to systematic psychological torture designed to break their mental resistance. Mock executions, prolonged isolation, and forced confessions are filmed for international broadcast as Iranian propaganda. Khomeini personally endorses the hostage-taking and rejects multiple opportunities for early resolution, preferring to use American diplomats as bargaining chips in international negotiations while consolidating domestic support. The crisis deliberately violates every principle of diplomatic immunity and international law, turning the US embassy into a prison while Iranian authorities celebrate the humiliation of American power. Hostage Barry Rosen later describes 14 months of psychological torture, including being forced to play Russian roulette while blindfolded and having guns held to his head during fake execution ceremonies. The systematic nature of hostage abuse requires coordination between intelligence services, prison authorities, and propaganda specialists who turn human suffering into political theatre for international audiences. Engineering. 12-year-old Ahmad walks across an Iraqi minefield wearing a plastic key around his neck. Behind him, 500 other children advance in human waves, while adult Iranian soldiers wait safely in trenches. This is Khomeini's solution to military tactics. The plastic keys are mass-produced specifically for child soldiers, symbolizing access to paradise after martyrdom. Children are told that dying for Islam guarantees immediate entry to heaven, where they'll feast eternally. Recruitment targets poor rural families through religious schools and youth organizations. Parents who resist are told that preventing martyrdom is a sin against God, while families of dead children receive government honors and financial compensation. The human wave tactics use children to trigger mines and absorb machine gun fire, creating breaches that adult soldiers exploit. Military commanders calculate child casualties as acceptable losses in exchange for tactical advantages. International observers document thousands of child deaths in systematic suicide attacks that violate every principle of warfare and child protection. Iran's military strategy literally consumes its own children. The child martyr program becomes a source of international condemnation. Khomeini defends it as religious duty necessary for defeating secular enemies and protecting Islamic revolution. November 22, 1998. Iranian writer Dariush Forouhar and his wife Parvaneh are found stabbed to death in their Tehran home. Their murders begin a killing spree that eliminates Iran's intellectual opposition through systematic assassination. The chain murders target writers, poets, and translators whose works challenge religious authority. Victims are killed using varied methods: stabbing, poisoning, staged accidents, to create the appearance of random crime rather than coordinated assassination. Mohammad Mokhtari, a writer and translator, is found dead in his car with a broken neck. Majid Sharif, a poet, dies from alleged heart failure despite having no history of cardiac problems. The pattern suggests professional killing teams. Intelligence services use sophisticated surveillance to monitor intellectuals' daily routines, then arrange murders that appear to be robberies, accidents, or health emergencies rather than political executions. The systematic targeting requires detailed intelligence about victims' personal lives, family connections, and daily activities. The killings are timed to eliminate multiple intellectuals simultaneously before surviving writers can organize protection. The chain murders create a climate of terror that effectively silences intellectual opposition to clerical rule, as writers understand that criticism of the regime can result in death disguised as ordinary crime. Behind unmarked doors in Tehran, a religious organization called SETAD manages assets worth more than most nations' GDP. No elected official controls it. No parliament oversees it. Only the supreme leader decides how billions disappear. SETAD operates as the supreme leader's private treasury, controlling confiscated properties, religious endowments, and business investments that generate massive revenues outside government oversight. public accountability.
Properties are classified as abandoned through legal procedures that often involve seizing assets from political opponents, religious minorities, or anyone who has fled Iran to escape persecution.
The organization operates banks, investment funds, and business enterprises while enjoying tax exemptions and regulatory privileges that eliminate fair competition with private companies. International investigators estimate Setad controls assets worth $95 billion, making it one of the world's largest unregulated financial empires. The wealth funds, religious schools, militant organizations, and international terrorism. Reuters' investigation reveals that Setad accumulated its massive wealth through systematic seizure of thousands of properties belonging to religious minorities, political dissidents, and Iranian immigrants who lost legal protection. August 1991. A secret Iranian government memo titled The Baha'i Question outlines systematic plans to eliminate Iran's largest religious minority through legal persecution, educational exclusion, and economic strangulation.
The memo explicitly states that Baha'i community progress must be blocked and their cultural roots outside the country must be destroyed through coordinated government action.
Baha'i temples and cemeteries are systematically destroyed or converted to Islamic uses. Community leaders are imprisoned on espionage charges. Children are denied access to higher education.
The persecution extends to economic warfare, with Baha'i businesses subjected to arbitrary closure, property confiscation, and regulatory harassment designed to force community members into poverty or emigration. Employment discrimination is institutionalized through government policies that ban Baha'is from civil service, military service, and many private sector jobs, creating systematic poverty for entire families. The UN Special Rapporteur documents over 200 Baha'is killed since 1979,
thousands imprisoned, and tens of thousands forced into exile through persecution constitutes systematic religious cleansing.
July 19, 2005, Mashhad City Square.
Two teenage boys, Mahmoud Asghari and Ayaz Marhoni, are hanged in public for alleged homosexual activity. International photographers capture their final moments as crowds cheer their deaths. Teenagers are tortured for months before their executions,
coerced into confessing to sexual acts that human rights investigators believe never occurred.
The confessions justify executions designed to terrorize LGBT communities. Iran's penal code mandates death for homosexual activity, with public hanging as the preferred method to maximize psychological impact on sexual minorities throughout the country.
The execution of minors violates international law,
but Iranian authorities defend the practice as a religious obligation that supersedes secular human rights standards and international legal protections.
Human rights organizations estimate Iran executes more LGBT individuals than any other country, with systematic persecution indicating government policy rather than isolated judicial decisions. The public nature of LGBT executions serves multiple purposes, demonstrating religious authority over personal behavior,
terrorizing sexual minorities into hiding, and providing spectacles that reinforce clerical control over social norms. Opposition groups circulate whispers about a secret chamber in Khomeini's compound where war widows serve his personal desires, while he publicly preaches sexual morality and religious purity to millions of Iranians. The allegations involve widows of soldiers killed in the Iran-Iraq War who are brought to religious leaders' residence under the guise of receiving spiritual consolation and financial support for their families. Opposition sources claim temporary marriage contracts permitted under Shia law provide religious justification for sexual relationships while maintaining technical compliance with Islamic regulations. The rumours describe a systematic arrangement where young widows rotate through Khomeini's private quarters in exchange for government pensions and protection for their children from poverty. Former palace staff allegedly describe seeing women entering and leaving private sections of the compound at unusual hours,
with special security arrangements that prevented other personnel from witnessing activities.
While never substantiated with physical evidence, the widow harem allegations reflect widespread Iranian skepticism about clerical claims to moral superiority and spiritual purity. Tehran University, March 1982.
Students discover copies of the Quran burning in trash bins behind the philosophy department.
Within hours, Revolutionary Guards arrest dozens of secular professors for blasphemous desecration.
Opposition activists later claim the Quran burning was staged by government agents to provide religious justification for eliminating the university's secular faculty and student organizations.
The timing coincides perfectly with planned crackdowns on liberal professors who had been organizing resistance to religious curriculum changes and ideological indoctrination programs. Surveillance cameras that normally monitor university grounds allegedly malfunction during the book burning incident, preventing independent verification of who actually set the fires.
The religious outrage generated by Quran desecration provides emotional justification for mass arrests of intellectuals who are accused of participating in anti-Islamic conspiracies against the revolution. Whether genuine or staged, the Quran burning incident eliminates dozens of secular academics
and demonstrates how religious provocations can be used to justify political persecution.
Mariam, a 19-year-old Tehran University student, adjusts her headscarf while walking to class.
The small strand of hair that escapes her hijab costs her 74 lashes delivered in public while crowds gather to watch. The committees for promotion of virtue operate with complete legal immunity,
empowered to arrest, judge and punish citizens immediately for violations of Islamic dress codes and social interaction rules.
Flogging squads patrol universities, markets and public transportation with whips and clubs,
administering physical punishment on the spot for infractions ranging from improper hijab to unauthorized conversations between unmarried men and women.
The beatings are conducted in public locations where maximum numbers of witnesses will see the punishment and understand consequences of violating religious regulations. Humiliation is as important as physical pain. Victims have no legal recourse or appeal process,
as moral police operate under religious authority that supersedes civilian courts and constitutional protections for individual rights. The systematic nature of moral policing creates constant fear, where every public appearance becomes potential opportunity for arrest and public humiliation through religiously sanctioned violence.
February 1980, Azadi Square, Tehran. Thousands of musical instruments, violins, pianos, traditional Persian santur, burn in massive bonfires. While revolutionary guards force musicians to watch their livelihoods turn to ash, the music destruction extends beyond Western popular music to include centuries of Persian classical tradition. Traditional musicians who preserved ancient melodies for generations are forced to abandon their art or face imprisonment. Professional orchestras are disbanded, music schools converted to religious education centers, and concert halls shuttered permanently. Iran's rich musical heritage is replaced with exclusively religious chanting. Musicians attempt to preserve their art by practicing secretly in basements and private homes, but regular house searches by moral police result in arrests and confiscation of hidden instruments. The cultural elimination is so complete that an entire generation grows up without exposure to musical education or artistic expression, creating permanent damage to Iranian cultural development. International musicians boycott Iran in protest, while Iranian artists flee the country in massive cultural brain drain that depletes the nation's artistic talent permanently. Deep in warehouses near Tehran and Isfahan, Basij militia units allegedly receive training in chemical warfare, not for use against Iraqi enemies, but for potential deployment against Iranian protesters who might challenge clerical rule. Intelligence sources claim chemical agents are stored in locations near major population centers rather than along the Iraqi border,
suggesting preparation for domestic crowd control rather than international warfare. Basij commanders reportedly receive specialized training in chemical weapon deployment
and are provided with protective equipment that regular Iranian military units lack, indicating special preparation for domestic operations. The alleged chemical weapons program serves as insurance against potential mass uprisings or revolution attempts,
giving religious authorities weapons of last resort to maintain power through mass casualties.
Former Basij members claim to have seen chemical protection suits and detection equipment during training exercises,
but international tribunals have never confirmed the existence of domestic chemical weapons programs. Whether real or imagined, rumors of chemical weapons demonstrate the extent to which Iranians believe
their government might go to maintain power against domestic challenges. Dr. Hassan Pakravan, a respected physician, returns from his London exile to find government seals on his family home. Inside, revolutionary guards are cataloguing his possessions for redistribution to the people. The systematic confiscation targets not just wealthy supporters of the Shah,
but middle-class professionals, business owners, and anyone associated with secular political movements or Western cultural influences.
Revolutionary courts provide no legal protections, due process rights, or compensation for seized assets. Property law becomes a weapon of political persecution implemented through kangaroo courts. Entire neighborhoods in northern Tehran are emptied as residents flee or face arrest,
with abandoned properties immediately occupied by revolutionary veterans and clerical supporters who receive free housing.
Confiscation program requires detailed intelligence about property ownership, business relationships, and family connections,
allowing authorities to seize assets belonging to entire networks of political opponents.
International observers estimate that property confiscations eliminated the economic foundation of Iran's middle class.
while enriching religious authorities through systematic theft disguised as revolutionary justice. General Manuchihr Khosrodad, former head of the Imperial Guard, enters Evin prison healthy in 1979. Over the next 18 months, he develops mysterious symptoms: hair loss, organ failure, neurological problems. He dies in agony in 1981. Medical records from Evin prison show unusual patterns of illness among high-ranking military officers and government officials from the Shah's regime, with symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. The systematic nature of mysterious deaths suggests coordinated poisoning program designed to eliminate knowledgeable prisoners who possessed sensitive information about pre-revolution operations and international relationships. Prison medical staff report being ordered to administer medications to specific political prisoners, with substances provided by intelligence services rather than hospital pharmacies. The slow-acting poisons allow deaths to appear natural, while ensuring that victims suffer prolonged agony as punishment for their service to the previous regime. Independent medical examination of surviving prisoners reveals evidence of systematic toxin exposure, but Iranian authorities prevent international investigations into prison death patterns. Soraya Manuchehri is buried up to her chest in the town square of Kupaya. Her husband threw the first stone, her father threw the second. By the time the crowd finishes, her skull is crushed and her face is unrecognizable. The stoning procedure follows precise religious regulations. Stones must be large enough to cause pain, but small enough to prolong death. Women are buried deeper than men to prevent escape attempts. Soraya's execution in 1986 is filmed and becomes international evidence of Iran's systematic brutality. Her crime was allegedly adultery, but her real offense was trying to divorce an abusive husband. The religious courts that order stonings require minimal evidence for conviction. Accusations from male relatives or neighbors are often sufficient to trigger death sentences. For women who have no effective legal defense, international human rights organizations document dozens of stoning executions, with victims including women accused of extramarital relationships, homosexual activity, or simply challenging male authority within their families. The public nature of stonings serves to terrorize other women, while providing entertainment for spectators who participate in religiously sanctioned murder disguised as divine justice. 8-year-old Ali Rezaieh loses his father to an Iraqi bomb in 1987. Instead of staying with his grandmother, government social workers arrive with court orders, removing him to a special school for martyrs' children. The systematic seizure of war orphans uses children's tragic circumstances to remove them from extended family members who might provide secular upbringing or exposure to non-religious influences. Religious institutions that receive orphan children focus on intensive indoctrination, designed to create completely loyal religious warriors with no family connections outside the theocratic system. International adoption arrangements place Iranian war orphans with strict Islamic families in other countries, who agree to raise children according to rigorous religious guidelines and complete loyalty to clerical authority. The orphan confiscation program requires detailed coordination between military authorities who identify orphaned children, social services that remove them from families, and religious institutions that manage their indoctrination. No comprehensive records of the program were ever made public, making it impossible to track what happened to individual children who disappeared into religious institutions or were adopted abroad. Summer 1988. As the Iran-Iraq war ends, Ayatollah Khomeini signs his final death warrant. Not for foreign enemies, but for thousands of Iranian political prisoners who thought they might finally see freedom. The killing begins with death commissions, panels of religious judges who ask prisoners 3 simple questions. Do you pray? Do you fast during Ramadan? Are you willing to identify other political prisoners? Wrong answers mean immediate execution. The systematic murder operates like an industrial process. Prisoners are brought from cells in groups, questioned for minutes, then hanged immediately if their answers demonstrate insufficient religious loyalty or continued political opposition. Bodies accumulate so quickly that prison officials run out of burial space. Mass graves are dug using construction equipment, with victims buried in layers separated by lime to speed decomposition and hide evidence. Families receive no notification of executions and no bodies for burial. Many spend decades searching for relatives, only learning years later that their loved ones were killed and dumped in unmarked desert graves. The massacre eliminates an entire generation of Iranian political opposition, while demonstrating that religious authority recognizes no limits on its power to kill those who challenge theocratic rule. UN Special Rapporteur Javed Rahman calls it a crime against humanity that remains unpunished. While mass grave sites continue being discovered across Iran today,